This is my second video of the day. Sorry if, well, I got to do this because I'm putting together for a course and people are already interested in it. So I just pointed out in the previous video that there was a new California Association of Realtors purchase agreement for 2018. That would update all my other videos out there that are on YouTube and other places, and even in my course at winnerscheck.org. But it only impacts realtors. The change, according to C.A.R. I just showed that in the previous video because it's in the broker box, which really isn't part of the contract between the buyer and the seller. Although lenders think it is, in my opinion, it's not. It's there for the realtor convenience and making sure that realtors get paid. And now, when a realtor asks the listing agent for an affirmation that he has presented the offer to the seller, the listing agent has to give them the affirmation in writing. That's that big change. But I thought it brought up this other thing. I've done all these other videos on it, and in my own practice, I sort of made it a no-brainer. In fact, when I saw there was a new change, I was like, oh, does that mean I have to really go back and read this thing paragraph by paragraph? Because I understand all the paragraphs. I've taught in it. Most of the important ones are in me, like knowing that it's an as-is contract, but buyers have a right to inspection. When a legal issue comes up, I always have to go to the paragraph and read it because I don't want to make a mistake. But I was like, whoa, I guess I got to do this. And it turned out it didn't really because not much was changed. But it reminds me of what it's like when you're looking at this the first time as a buyer or seller. Even if you're a lawyer and you haven't been working with these contracts or you're great with contracts, it's fresh. And I'm going to put this training in my course. I may make it private on YouTube. I don't know what I'm going to do about it on Facebook. It may always be there. I don't even mind. But the point is at winnerscheck.org, I'm putting this into a course. And one of the benefits to the course, or I think I'm going to have free training, is this is going to be what marketing people would say, this is the upsell. You can sell your home on your own, but if you want help with the forms, I'm going to find a way to help you set these forms up. California Association of Realtor forms, not just, I have training in there on where to get the alternative forms that are free. But many people, buyers and lawyers and whoever their advisors, are comfortable with the C.A.R forms. So, and I've actually was requested this. I'm going to put this training on there and make it a sort of an upsell. I'm willing to work with the buyers and the sellers to come up with a neutral form on neutral ground, just acting as the form filler, explaining it. They'll work out the terms. And I think that it's going to be such a reasonable fee because as a seller, it's going to give you the confidence that you know what you're doing. And it's going to get those buyers over the hump to understand that the process is going to be fair because they can actually have a consultation or at least the video training and go over this and how we go over the forms. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that yet. That's going to come to me when this is put together. And it obviously changes. People have different requests. So this is the, well, that's what it is. Now we're going to go over and look at it over here. I should have done this because Facebook likes it better when they see people. But I don't know. I probably won't be able to market this on Facebook. That's okay. Now, here is... I'm going to be looking over here. That might be... Well, I wasn't looking at the camera anyway, so you don't care. Date prepared. Let's say it's today, but I'm going to leave this as a blank form eventually. So this, to me, this is going to take a little while. I hope you're... Well, it's up to you. Date prepared... As I said in the older videos from a few years ago, people used to wonder what the date of the contract was when they referred to it. And some, like, lenders wouldn't know any better, or banks and short sale people didn't know any better. And they get confused between the date up here and the date the contract was finally signed. And this is date prepared. The date of the contract is on the last page of this RPA where the signatures are. And that's usually, it was page 8 in old days, but I think we've got... let me just go to the last page so there's no issue. It's not page 8 on this one. It is page 10. No, it's page 10. Okay, so page 10 of this contract. This is what I consider when this is all buttoned up back here. That's the date of the contract, in my opinion. So this is date prepared. That's just like a basic thing because it's going to get referred to at some point. Probably. All right, now this is where the buyer puts their name in, and the buyer, if they're getting loans, especially if they're doing it as an entity, like you might, let's say this is an investment property we're talking about here. The buyer might want to buy it in a trust or some other entity. And if they're going to get a loan, I would know about the loan process quickly. Like, let's say I saw this property on a Sunday and I made an offer. By the time I went to contract, I'd want to get the right entity in there that the lender's going to be happy with. Here's where the address is. I frequently write in something like one great house. And then we go, city, state. I don't think, I mean, I'm a lawyer. I'm sorry for the caveats. I have heard of cases where people, when somebody thought they were buying something else and they were getting something or they weren't getting the whole complete property. I've actually had that problem in my office. So at some point, if you can narrow this down to the assessor's parcel, that's great. But I don't think the seller or the buyer really understands this property to be the assessor's parcel. So this is really for the professional who is really doing their due diligence. Otherwise, identify the property and make sure that title and escrow are all on the same page at some point in time. Purchase price. I'd leave this blank until you agree on what the price is at the end. Well, if you're a buyer, there's two ways we're talking about in the training. There's the realtor style, the best realtor style I know, where you say, look, we've got an offer, but we've told everybody that we're having an open house this weekend, so we're not looking at offers until Monday or Sunday night. And then we'll let you know. And so if you're a buyer and you need to make an offer and you're here, this is where you'd put in your price. That was obvious, I'm sorry. Escrow. I like days after acceptance. Some people aren't comfortable with variables, but it could take a day or two to get this thing all signed up. So this gives the 31 days or the 30. Again, if you're a buyer and you want the property soon, as opposed to for some other reason, talk with your lenders to make sure they can perform. In busy periods, in periods of lots of refis, 30 days can sometimes be difficult. Other lenders can close in 21 days. I've done that a few times. This is also important. If you're selling your home and they're going to use some of the proceeds to buy another, you want to give yourself, you want to time it. Now, in general, there is no general here. It's just difficult to time it perfectly. You want to talk to escrow to see them if you can close on X in the morning. Can they go back to back and have that money go into and fund the same day? So if you're selling your home, you want to make sure you've got all this. This is the preparation to do a good deal. As a realtor, I ask my clients those things all the time. It's not. We're just going through this. You're going to have to remember to do the little things. Write it down. Do whatever you got to do. Now, I would just write NA. I don't want to do this because this is one of my samples. I don't want to put the extra work in. In fact, it might have gotten sucked in from my template. So I'm not, but I would just cross all that out and write in NA. In fact, I'm going to do that because, you can see I've worked with other people before. Okay, so there was the people who saw their name in there might recognize a transaction or two. I don't think anyone's going to really care. I'm concerned, but so be it. It's on. I'm going to have to make this private. All right, so and we're going to take this out too. So I put NAs in those boxes over there. The initial deposit. I'm going to say that in some states, or at least when I was younger, I used to hear about like good sized deposits. Now they're like $3,000, $5,000. Depending on who I'm working with and what we're negotiating, and sometimes you get a feeling that these people are stretching themselves, and I'd like to see them perform. I sometimes talk about having a second step up deposit that's significant. Sometimes we leave it blank. But let's say you put 5,000. Well, I want to help you make this easy, right? You want buyers to want to buy with you. Well, it really depends on how important it is for you to close. I mean, if you want a rock solid closing, you increase that amount. You might increase it up to, like if there's a big cash component of this deal, you might say 10,000 here, right? All right, let's make it 9. Some people don't like unlucky numbers. I was born on the 13th, so I'm not really worried. I don't have triskaidekaphobia. Now, many times buyers come back and say, hey, I have the money. Here's the proof. It's in the bank account. That's a lot of cash, but I don't like to take my cash out and get it tied up. I'm losing a little interest. I'm going to perform, or whatever it is. That be reasonable in these circumstances, because as a seller, it's really hard for you to get the buyer's deposit anyway. The case law makes it tough. Using the forms properly makes it tough. So this is really about you getting the buyer to make an offer that you like, the buyer making an offer that they like, and winning the competition, and then working together to get this thing closed and collegially as best as possible. You're on the same team. If you start thinking the buyer's suspicious, then you get hardball, and you play hardball, and you start making them nail their contingencies down and things like that. But there's plenty of outs in here for the buyer. It's not like you've got that money tied down as a seller. So, up until the contingencies get closed, there's no point in playing hardball. Now, if you're doubting that there's cash or I'm not going to discuss if you're trying to make this money go hard and the deposit's forfeited. That's a whole set of lawyering that's not in this course right now. I mean, if we're doing that, we're changing this to a 3-pager or something like that anyway. Now, if they go all cash offer, that's interesting. Let's go back to the deposit. Now, I usually leave this blank and just say within 3 days, because I don't care, as a seller or the seller's agent, I discuss this, I don't care if it's a cashier's check or a personal check or other. I would like to see, this is how it normally happens with agents. When the offer comes in, there will be a pre-approval from the lender, from the bank, and there's better things than pre-approval. You can talk with lenders about that. There's stronger things. I don't put that much credence in them anyway, though, because there's always the quality check at the end that makes the real difference. But you get the pre-approval, you get proof of funds that they can close. Like if they're going to put down 10%, if they're getting an 80% loan, you want to see that they have 20%, or you want to see the story. I'll liquidate this stuff. I'm getting this. Whatever it is, you want to know the story, where the money's coming from. You want to see some sort of proof. Now I know people can fake Photoshop their stuff, but I haven't run into that very often. I have, but not very often. So you want to have proof that they can close, pre-approval from the bank, and a check. A picture of the check is usually with the buyer's realtor, and the buyer's realtor brings it over to escrow. Or the buyer realtor says, here's a picture of the check, gives the check back to the client, then the client's got to open escrow. You could say, instead of 3 days, I think you could say 1 business day here. Well, actually you can't. You could say orally, as soon as we go to contract, I'd like to see it as the first step in the good faith closing. I'd like to see you get that check into escrow within 1 business day. Because again, this contract is not to destroy the other side. It's to work together towards both buying the home. I once had a broker that I worked with say that as a broker, no, he was an agent. As an agent, he felt he had a duty to the buyer or seller he was working with, but also to the transaction, because essentially the transaction is what the buyer and seller want to accomplish until they tell them otherwise. I always thought that was an interesting way to look at it. You're trying to get this done, so you should have some fidelity to the transaction itself. It's not a competition to destroy the other side. It's not who's the better lawyer. There's a lot of that going on with realtors. It's not who's the more meticulous realtor, who's the one who understands the forms better, who worries about whether it's in contract or out of contract, which was a joke of an analysis of these forms. You're in contract until it's canceled. Now, You may not be performing 100% under the terms, but if the seller chooses not to close the contingencies, you're still in contract. The seller's just giving the buyer a break. We'll get to that. That may come up in our training. Now, I like to, if you're a seller and you're really conscientious, you'd like to, or the buyer in particular, really, you become aware of what you've talked to your lender. You're hoping to get a loan at, let's say, 4.5%. It could be lower right now. And if all you can do is to qualify for this amount of money is have a loan at that number or less, that might not make you look very strong. You might say, I can afford to close this, but if we had some sort of oil or energy spike or war broke out, I'm not going to close it on 10%, even if I qualify for a 10% loan. I think that's reasonable. These things should be discussed. So I always feel comfortable with a bit of a cushion over current rates in that slot. As I advise my sellers that, and I advise that to buyers, right? Don't leave this blank so that, don't leave this so that it's so tight, that's it. If you can, if that's all you can do, that's all you can do, and we put it in there. But if you have some leeway, put it in there. It makes you look like a stronger buyer, the kind of buyer a smart listing agent would say, this guy's cool. He knows that, first of all, someone knows what they're doing. Second of all, they have some leeway here. And if interest rates spike more than 1.5 points, so be it. If this guy's credit's so bad that he needs to pay 7 or 8%, he can choose to do that. He or she could choose to do that. So this doesn't stop them from closing. It's just, it gives them an out against a crazy jump in interest rates, and that's understandable. There have been times to use additional financing terms. This is where and this form actually, if you're working with me, you're going to tell me how this, or I'm going to solicit this information from you, elicit this information from you. But okay, so I'll just tell you. Let's say it was let's say $700,000. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Did I do that? Yeah. Okay, so I hit enter, and now, like magic, like a spreadsheet, these things are calculated and it comes in there. It's really nice because I remember back in the days when people were working with paper contracts all the time, and we did see mistakes in these numbers. Now, this verification, a good policy for buyers is to have that all together. But I've worked with people, it's a weekend, their bank's not open, they don't not go with their online banking or whatever, and they're like, I'll get it to you Monday. Now, that's why sometimes it's important to have a representative, because I don't know, when you've been doing this for a while, you get a feel of what's real and what's not. We didn't talk about the date before. That's still going to be the date prepared in there. Here's the 17 days. I go over in training, I go over this contract paragraph by paragraph in my course. These are all interesting. We could spend all day on that, so we're not going to. Just see the course. I'm going to check that. Or the videos on the net. On YouTube. 21 days. Now, I have to go over this because I'm talking about this from I'm going to talk about it from all sides. That seems fair. As a seller, I like it when the buyers remove their contingencies, particularly the loan contingency. However, I understand that even if the lender doesn't come through and the buyer I've been working with can't close, it's still going to be really, really hard for me to get their deposit. Just California courts don't do that very easily. Frankly, it can be done according to one lawyer I've spoken with. But when people have asked me to do it, and I go, if my litigation fee is $375 an hour, and even if I discounted it down to $225 an hour, $200 an hour, we'd be drafting a complaint, or we'd be going to arbitration I'd have to prepare. We're looking at thousands of dollars in legal fees. So, you're going to have to go about this on your own. You're going to have to deal with liquidated damages theories of the law. It's not likely that you're going to pay me or someone else to get that deposit for you. And your time, every day you're fighting escrow is going to get ticked at some point. They're gonna file, maybe, I forgot the word, it's interpleader. They're gonna just deposit, I think it's interpleader. They're gonna deposit the money with the court and say, fight it out. We don't want to deal with it anymore. Escrow calls and complains to me all the time. Please don't make this do it. I just, unless you've got the cash to go for it, and it might not be with me anyway, this is not something that your goal should be to get that deposit. So we can close down that loan contingency, but if the bank's not going to lend and the bank messed up this buyer, if it's a really big deal and it's a lot of money, maybe you get the right from the buyer to go sue their lender and the buyer agrees to cooperate with you. I don't know. But that's not my field anymore. I don't litigate. I haven't litigated often in the last 10 years. And that's not my goal. My goal is to help people buy and sell houses, or if they want out, when they want out, and you hired me outside of this training, I can help you, especially as a buyer, get out. I can occasionally help sellers get out of listing contracts, but it's hard for sellers to get out of this if the buyer's performing. Let's just put that down there anyway. No loan contingencies are nice. We see them in hot markets. Cash buyers do things like that. There's an interweave between the cash buy and the no loan contingency. It's been so long since I had to deal with it, but if I did, just read those things together. This is the type of thing that bothers me. So what do we got? We got all cash offer. No loan is needed to purchase. This offer is not contingent on the buyer obtaining a loan. Written verification of sufficient funds to close the transaction is attached. So now you've got. Yeah, I guess there might be a few people that are getting loans, but they don't want a loan contingency to hold up the deal, and they want to be honest about it. I mean, if you're getting a loan, but you don't want it to impact the deal, you could just say all cash offer. But then a seller might say, hey, where's all that cash coming from? Where is it? And so maybe, I've never seen it, but now I knew I'd thought about it before. So I think that you could say, I'm getting a loan, but there's no loan contingency. And that might be pretty cool. Because as I said, people are unlikely, like especially if you have a small deposit up, people are unlikely to go for your deposit anyway because it's so expensive. No, skip that last statement. That's irresponsible of me. Don't play that game because you might lose. That was just me brainstorming. Okay, so I'm going to just cover the check boxes and the blanks. This agreement on buyer's ability to obtain financing are not contingent upon the sale of any property owned by buyer. Or, yes, it is. There are good forms for this. There's arrangements. If this is, if you're a buyer and you want to present this in a way that works, it's not easy, but you want to work with someone who knows what they're doing, who can vouch for you, who can say my property's under contract or it's sold or we've got it at a reasonable price. I expect things to happen. If I'm the listing agent, I'm saying, well, I expect things to happen in 10 days. What do you think about that? If you want to work with them. And then there's some back and forth and you're like, okay, well, this is the expectation. This is how it's going to go. But we're going to blow you out of there in 10 days. Whatever it is. Addenda. Well, if you're doing this yourself, I don't think you want to worry about backup addendum. I have had clients who have had to do this because they're out in the country. Short sale addendum, I did hundreds of those, reviewed them with people, negotiated lots of short sales, over 100. It doesn't come up very much anymore. Probate I've done, trust I've done. These are important for people doing trust, but I doubt trustees are, well, not many are probably doing it on their own. But a trustee who hasn't lived in the property doesn't have as many disclosures to be concerned about. Although they should always disclose any material facts that they know. And material facts is something significant that might affect the value of the house. In short, that might not be the exact legal definition. That's, for me, what I consider it. I have in my course, I have a disclosure section. We review the forms and talk about how it happens, and I can also offer live training if you would like to have that. Okay, so sometimes there are other terms. Now, I sometimes don't have space to put stuff in the other section, so I do sometimes put terms in there, and you may too. Now, here's where the fairness and local custom comes into play, and since I'm saying this for all of California, I don't know in your area how your custom is, and luckily, I tell my clients, and most of them agree, let's assume there's going to be a few $1,000s one way or other in these boxes here, and let's talk about the big numbers. There's no point in fighting over little numbers when the big numbers more than overwhelm them. So let's say that, yeah, the buyer has a reason for not wanting to come cash out of pocket. Some buyers just don't like the ticky-tacky stuff. There's a million reasons. As the seller, I'm like, I'm not worried about that. Let me just make up for it in my price up here. Now, it's possible that someone is negotiating on there, trying to beat you here. They're trying to beat you on the price. Chisel, 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 chisel. Well, at that point, you just don't work with them. Right? You're the seller. You're in control. Buyer, again, I would try to get a good price and be magnanimous here, but it's all psychology. So if someone's already thinking about that, maybe it goes away. But whatever you do, don't blow deals over the few $100s here, or escrow fee, fighting over $200 in escrow costs when you're dealing with $1 million home or $800. I mean, what's the $700,000 the average price? So in California. And there's multiple offers. Don't forget about that. So buyers have the big strategy in mind. Sellers have the big strategy in mind, unless you've got a reason not to. And then just be forthcoming about it. Hey, look, I don't mind the number that we're paying for the home. And if you don't like the fact that I'm making $1,000 in costs over what's local and custom, let's just, you're welcome to counter me $1,000 higher, or whatever it is. In the end, it's a big pile of money, and it's how much is getting carved off. It's almost pointless to fight over the carve-offs unless you have a reason. Okay, so now this is pretty standard nowadays, 50-50 each. Now, escrow holders shall be. I have some personal favorites, I really do, of escrow companies, especially because some of them are some of my customers have sold multiple properties, and you get with one escrow company and they're really good. I've had another escrow company that did unbelievably great work in a difficult transaction that I'd like to use again. And they worked at a big company. I've had, when I was selling a ton of properties, like 20 a month on the short sales, I had a department that was so used to my business, they did anything within limits that we needed to get done to do a deal. I had an Orange County escrow woman who was so good at helping me close short sales because she had done so many of these and she knew everybody at the bank. So if I was having trouble, she had a contact. And we, as a lawyer and her, she could act like I was really doing the negotiating paper. Actually, someone in my office was doing most of that, but she would then talk to the banks through the other end, the money end, where their money's coming in, the funding and going out, and she's already talking. I mean, we had a wonderful routine for closing short sales. We got so many closed because we had a relationship. But you don't have those relationships if you're doing this yourself. So I would, because you're going to need some help, I would call up a Stewart or Fidelity or Chicago or First American, one of the big public traded ones, and say, hey, are you comfortable working with the C.A.R. forms? Are you comfortable working with this other set of forms? I'm thinking of selling on my own. I've got some advice from an attorney, but I'm going to do it on my own. Are you comfortable working with us? I'm also in the contract going to write in that we're using you for title. So this could be a little more than $2,000 in fees, and maybe there'd be one to work with you for that, right? Maybe you've got friends there. So at some point, this is where the preparation comes in. You talk to these places ahead of time. You tell them your situation. You see who you want to work with, and you write that in, and you can tell buyer that's why you're comfortable too, and say, and I wouldn't, you can check for yourself, but, these companies are publicly traded companies, and this is their escrow arm. So for me, I'd feel my money is more safe than if I was at some smaller time operation, which may or may not be true. The smaller time operations frequently, all except for a small percentage of the money, title has custody. My understanding, and I could be wrong, but when I've talked to them, and I haven't done this in 10 years, but when I used to C.A.R, when I was working with the smaller ones, they said, well, you don't have to worry because title, when the money gets wired in from the lender, title, this is how I pictured it in my head. It was the escrow company's account at that title company, or that title company maybe it was a joint account with the title company at the banks, and the banks knew the title company really controlled that hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so there was only a few, maybe it was the deposit that was at risk at the smaller operation. If you want to work with a smaller escrow company, and I like them, there's some of my favorites, but you're concerned about money, as I would be, find that stuff out, confirm it with the title company, maybe even get it in writing. Share that with the buyer, because that's why these contracts are set up. Eliminating buyer's objections cause bigger offers, stronger offers, and you want to eliminate as many buyer issues as possible so that you can get the strongest offers possible, especially during the multiple offer negotiations. So you wipe out the buyer's objections. Buyers have buyer's remorse. When you see a seller, they've got all these bases covered, they're eliminating all your objections. The properties are, maybe it's pre-inspected, you've got pre-disclosed, you've got this contract filled out, you're getting to see this material. You're dealing with a seller that may be more prepared than most agents. Well, I am not going to vouch for the seller. I don't know who you're dealing with. But, I think you're going a long way here. So, again, you can split it. And then this always makes sense. And I believe this was a choice in many forms ago. Buyer shall pay any title insurance. Because your lender is probably going to ask for what we used to call a rider. I don't know if it still is. This is insuring your buyer's lender. And it's become standard that the buyer pays for it. Obviously not an issue if you're paying cash. Other costs. I don't know how it works in your community. I would just go half and half until both of you agree otherwise. Well, let's actually read them. Seller shall pay county transfer tax or fee. Probably. Okay. It doesn't have to be. The seller can say, look, I just want my number. I want to hit it. That's all I'm looking for. That's it. So this is all buyer stuff. Let's say the seller comes down $20,000. The seller might say, but you're picking up all this stuff. Now, if you were going to say 50-50, if I'm looking to make the buyer pay for this, or I'm the buyer and I'm going to contract Monday, I'm calling up escrow and asking them, what's the fee going to be? I wouldn't agree to taking on liability unless I knew what the liability was going to be ahead of time for both buyer and seller. Eliminating variables helps the deal. So there can be city, there's county. HOA, frequently the seller pays in San Diego. And I've seen these vary. I see 400, 425 a lot, and when you're seeing this, it seems to be escalating every year. And the docks, so that's part of this, right? The docks and that. Now, some areas, more recently built, well now it's probably like a decade ago, there's also a transfer fee that they set up to go to like charities and things like that, and that can be 0.5% or 1%. If you're selling in a newer community, you want to find out about that. I lived in a community where somehow some houses transferred without that tax, and other times they did. It depended on escrow and title. It's that weird. Court cases have been fought about it. At least at the time they were. So, that's, let me see. I believe it was Bressie Ranch in Carlsbad that there was a discussion. I put it this way. I remember selling houses, some where that transfer fee was an issue and some weren't. Some absolutely just never came up. Other times it came up, and I don't recall how it was resolved. It was years ago. So just beware. So that could be significant. So you don't want to agree to it necessarily unless you know what it is. Seller shall pay HOA fees for prepping all documents. That's pretty common. So that transfer fee is that Bressie Ranch thing I was talking about. That's HOA fees for preparing documents other than those required. So you probably want to talk with your homeowners association, get those fees ahead of time so your buyer can understand what's going on. Otherwise, you're gonna, if you're gonna try to have them buy it, you better be able to explain it to them. Otherwise, seller. But you probably want to know anyway, right? I'm sorry. This was the private transfer fee. That's the Bressie Ranch fee. So these were all HOA things. See, I had my templates, and I have these all done. I had them for buyer, and I have for seller. We go over it. So this is an interesting exercise for me as well. Now, as a seller, I advise my sellers to pay $500. Now, if there's a pool and other things that can go over, sometimes lenders don't let you pay $700 if it was really $500. It's really funny. I've had issues like that, and I paid for it out of my fees, and one time I wasn't even allowed to pay for the difference. It was like, that's what you ordered, that's what it's got to stay, that's the way the loan is. So early on in the process, you want to nail that down. If you're a buyer and you're buying a pool that's more than a few years old, I'd say pay the money. It's either you or the seller. Refrigerators break down all the time. I had this when I bought my home in Poway. My pipes busted in the 6 months in one of the rooms. In fact, it was the wall behind this office. I have an office in Rancho Bernardo. I'm talking out of my home in Poway right now. And my warranty covered the pipes, but not the wall work. So we paid some, it was probably, I don't know, we paid some of the money and they paid some of the money. It was still helpful. Now, so I'd say buyer's choice, or you can pick. That was upgraded. So I'd say nowadays, 500 used to be plenty. Now if you're getting upgraded and you're covering a few things, it can be a little more than 500. Sometimes it can be as low as 400. Or that. This happens when you're flipping homes, right? When you're renovating, when you already know the place is a mess. And you're not going to be using those warranties. You're replacing everything. But otherwise, I think that's the way to go. And this helps buyers. Now, this item's included in the sale. I'm just going to say, read this extensively. They cover a lot of things. We're not going to cover this all now. You can write things in here. But this is where agents wind up buying refrigerators because there's a refrigerator in the garage and the seller doesn't think it transfers, the buyer does. People got it wrong. The agent got it wrong, misadvised somebody, and boom, they're out a refrigerator. I've been out a refrigerator. So this whole thing makes sense to you. Read it for the things you care about as a buyer. Read it for the things you want to take with you, for the things you want to stay on the wall. Read it with respect to any cool upgrades that you may have made for electronics, for water filtration, for your cool washer and dryer, for your stove. I always call it a stove. It's actually a range, right? That thing's on wheels. Make sure you understand what's going on in there about whether that thing's allowed to be whether that thing transfers on the sale because it's on wheels or not. If you're hot tubs in the backyard, massive issue. The buyer thinks, oh, the seller thinks, oh, the buyer's going to love my hot tub. The seller's like, I don't like hot tubs. They give me rashes. Please move that. They got to pull a crane in. I've helped people with this issue as a lawyer. They've got to pull a crane in to go over the house to pull the hot tub out of the property. It's happened at least twice in my career where this has come up. Not as a lawyer. Once as a lawyer, and that was enough because the last time it was the seller had a hot tub. And the seller wanted the buyer to take it. I've frankly forgotten how it was resolved, but it was all disclosed ahead of time and resolved properly. So that's just a very important section. That there's a meeting of the minds on what's included and what's not. Everyone should know this. And you can change these things by filling things in, but if you do so, make sure what you're doing is clear. That's what it needs to be, is clear. Closing and possession. Very important paragraphs again. This paragraph, lenders care about because they want to know that the buyer is intending to move in or not because the rates may be different. Seller occupied or vacant. So you're delivering at 6 p.m. on the day of the close of escrow. Or after the close of escrow. Not something I advise at all. If you're going to do it as a buyer or a seller, well, particularly the seller, make sure you understand you probably want to pull in a possession, another agreement. Seller remaining possession after the close. If seller has a right to remain in possession after close of escrow, the parties are advised to sign a separate occupancy agreement. Yes. Go through all that. Tenant occupied property shall be vacant at least 5 days. This is I'm living the pain of transactions where sellers wanted to get their full rent and consequently the tenants were still in there and they're like, oh, well, I'm not really in that hurry to move. Maybe they want to help me find a moving truck. The issue comes up a lot with tenants. One of the ways to deal with it is if you're buying it, well, it becomes when there's a tenant in there, you're buying to move into it. You really got to stress the 5 days. You've got to talk to the tenant and make sure it's okay as a buyer. Seller, you should be doing the same thing. That way your tenant, everyone should be operating in good faith, right? Now, I go through all these paragraphs in the training, but since there's very few blanks, let's just go look at the blanks. Seller, I advise you to have these reports ready as soon as you can so you can get them over to buyer. I have a disclosure. Normally the hard part about this is the disclosures, right? What are the material disclosures? I have that in the training at winnerscheck.org in the selling course. So just if you get this ready ahead of time, it takes so much of the worry away from the buyers. And it's also important, here, let me just give you a theory of the contract. If you've disclosed everything you did, even if you had some duties in here that you didn't hit your duties, you didn't do it on a timely basis, I'm going too far. The theory is you have all these things that are supposed to be done, but when the money transfers and they've got season, they get title of the property and you've got the cash and you're done, you're usually done, right? Even if you didn't do all these other things, you didn't brace the water heater, they're not going to be able to, in my opinion, they're not going to be able to cancel the contract because you didn't brace the water heater. Let's say you don't have the fire alarms. There's laws that say you got to have the fire detectors and the smoke detectors and the CO2 detectors. Well, that's not going to undo a contract very easily. I don't think it would at all. I don't think it'd be considered material. But what it would be material, what could cause a lawsuit, is if you don't disclose what you're supposed to disclose. That's how I'm going to say it now. In layman's, no. In the course, I go over it. My idea is that you're supposed to disclose the things that you're aware of, not just that you can see, but you're aware of, that would affect the value of the property to the buyer. Now, go to my course or other videos if you really want to go into what disclosures are supposed to be done. C.A.R's got these forms that help you pull out of it, that will help pull the information out of you. That's so have that done ahead of time. If you've got issues, talk to a lawyer. Realtors aren't supposed to really help you with those disclosures anyway. They're not licensed to do it. Okay, so buyer 17 days after acceptance to complete all buyer investigations. So this is the contingencies. If whether it's 21 for the loan, as what we saw earlier, 17, a buyer, there's a whole bunch of contingency things in here, and they can be altered, and they do get altered for cash sales or quick sales and all that. We go over this in detail. There's ways to remove the contingencies and say you're going to go ahead and close. And if you're not doing it, then the seller can try to force you to do it, or the transaction gets canceled after a period of time. That's what all this is about. This is the notice of buyer to seller or to perform. So it's 2 days, and it can be altered. Close of escrow. Must first deliver it. So you have to demand to close escrow. So these are ways that it ends when someone's not performing. This is the walkthrough. This is an important clause. Final verification. Buyer shall have the right to make a final verification of the property within 5 days prior to the close. Not as a contingency of the sale, but solely to confirm the property is maintained pursuant to paragraph 11. Repairs have been completed as agreed, and seller has complied with seller's other obligations under the agreement. So, my view of what this means is that, let's say the property, I'm going to try to, without revealing real client issues, I'm going to bring up a situation where my parents had a friend. This is a long time ago in La Jolla. And on the move out, damage was done. There was a flood because some plumbing got removed. There was damage in the garage by the moving truck, side of the garage. There were all sorts of damages that added up to a decent amount of money, over $10,000. And what this is saying is that it's not a contingency of the sale. So arguably, if I'm the seller, I'm saying that those particular damages are not enough for you to walk away, but I probably have to compensate you for them. I probably owe you the $10,000. We need to agree on what that price is. I need to repair them before you close, perhaps. But let's say somehow some serious damage was done to the point where it's not the same kind of property or the same quality or the same value of the property. I could see that becoming a contingency of the sale because the home is no longer what you were buying. It's significantly altered because of that damage. So, in my opinion, my legal opinion, I feel like that's what they're trying to say. Normally, because I've had that. I've had it in my transactions. Properties get damaged. Properties still are supposed to close. Buyers still want to buy the property. They just want it fixed. But it could be so significant something that it's no longer the same transaction. It's not a meeting of the minds. I had no intention to buy a house that had a flood from the upstairs that's changed the whole quality of the house. So here's the repairs talking about it. Is understood the exact restoration or appearance of cosmetic items. Seller shall. Okay, so these are questions about who can repair and how they can repair. I think in summary, you can say it's supposed to be done to quality standards and provide copies of invoices and paid receipts. You can negotiate that it's supposed to be a professional doing it, but what if the seller's pretty good at what he does and meticulous? So, if you're concerned and you want licensed people to do it, say so in your request for repairs, and then the negotiations would begin most likely. Now, this is just letting you know that prorations, and that can bite buyers in the butt. So talk to escrow about, are you going to be hit with any supplementals? Escrow wants to open up escrow. They want to see a copy of it anyway, and I think it's in everyone's interest usually most of the time to get in there right away. Open up escrow. You've already talked to them about it. These things need to mirror, otherwise it creates issues. Property is still closed, but sometimes lenders won't let it happen. And if it does close, this actually mitigates against wanting to do the upgraded, the second step in the deposit if you're not willing to do this again. But, that's really up to you. It's not necessary, but it can be done if you want to see proof, especially when it's a strong cash situation. But again, like I said, the buyers always say, but I don't want to lose my interest on this. So maybe you just do a one deposit. Mediation, arbitration are interesting. Again, in practice, we always have these things mirror. Otherwise, it can affect. It's argued that if they're not mirrored, there might not be a meeting of the minds in the contract. I used to have an opinion on that. I don't at the moment because it hasn't come up in 2 or 3 years for me. I will have a strong opinion that comes rushing back if I get into some more of those, but at the moment I do not. I think my opinion was at the time, this was 3 summers ago, if they weren't matching, it was still possible because no one really has to pay attention to what's written into the agreement. I mean, like that's meta lawyering, that's lawyering at the next level. It doesn't really matter until a judge or a jury decides, or an arbitrator or a mediator helps. Brokers do not guarantee the performance of any vendor. So a lot of these rest of these forms, attorney's fees, you should pay attention to that. 25. So again, you want to work this out. Even if you're pulling it apart, even if you're canceling, you want to work this out. Escrow pushes a lot of pressure on you to sign those agreements anyway. Unless you've got the money to pay a lawyer, to maybe lose in trying to capture the deposit, it's just better to work it out. Time is of the essence. This could be a clause if the buyer's not performing in the end, and usually due to their lender. The definitions, days, comes up a lot, so you want to read it. Days after, days prior. So know your days if you're trying to figure out when the buyer or seller is supposed to do something. Expiration. Now, if I'm thinking there's a multiple offer problem, I want a response from the seller by lunch the next day if it's in the evening, or by the end of the day today. If you're able to put this document together fast, get it signed, and get it over there. Say, look, I'd really like a quick decision today. You might even say, because it's a tough market. There's another property this is our first, but we'd want to seriously be in the running over there. So we need a decision soon. The seller's like, well, tomorrow I got to talk to my wife. I want to talk to my advisor. I want to talk to my lawyer. I'll get back to you tomorrow. And that could be the counteroffer. What actually happens most of the time is I'm not going to get back to you by noon, but I might get back to you by 5. I'm going to try, but I have to talk to my wife. So we'll get it over to you by then. And then, I've never seen the transaction break apart. In fact, I don't think it can. If it comes up, fine. But sign it up, get it done. If you're really, really retentive, you can change the time. You can all sign it and say it's all good. But I think the important thing, like I said, these things inside don't matter when it gets all buttoned up. Because you start performing, this contract's going to take over. You're not going to say, oh, but they got it back to us at 5 when they needed to get it back to us at 12. I don't think that, in my opinion, that would be immaterial and not of a concern to a judge looking at this. But that's just my opinion. Every judge is different. Every possibility is different. So if you want to do the extra work to clean it all up, I've cleaned up many contracts. You might want to too, just so it's all clean, so the buyers, lenders have no problem with it. Escrow has no problem with it. So it's a little bit extra work, but those are the things that realtors do, and sometimes lawyers and buyers agents have to do. This is when there's multiple buyers or representing somebody else, so there's a form for that. If there's a lot of buyers, it's this. This is for counters. There's an issue that comes up. People want the agreement and the counter all signed up. I've forgotten the position I've taken when this happens, because it happens a lot, and I don't want to get this wrong, but generally, I don't want anyone to be confused. So I only send over the counter and say, when I get the signed counter back, people believe me because I'm a lawyer. I say, look, I've done this a lot. I've had my clients sign the entire agreement, but I'm not delivering it to you, so it's not official. I've got the entire agreement signed by them. Or if I haven't been able to because someone's away, I tell them the truth. But the counter's coming over. When you sign that and it's all buttoned up, then I will immediately send it over to you for your lender, because lenders want the whole thing. I don't like to send the counter and the signed agreement, fully signed agreement over, because there could be funny business. You just uncheck this box and then, or someone, I mean, I don't know. That's just the way I do it. I like the way I do it. I've forgotten entirely why. Sellers, dated. You're good if you do that too. So, now, if you're following this is now for people who are already inside the course. If you've done the bidding and you know the number, you can use this form that I am going to go through and fill out and put in there, and I'm going to put a watermark on it, and you can say, this is a sample. You can we can agree to all the terms together in this sample, and then we can. I'll have a program where it's included. Obviously, you can always do it as a lawyer on a ad hoc basis or do it yourself. But if we fill out all these forms in the sample form, we'll have our attorney, John, draft it up and send it out for electronic signatures. No. I'm going to have you guys draft it up, write it out, and then you can send it to me, and I'll get electronic signatures on it. But if you're working together, I'm going to have the buyer, this is the plan. We'll have the buyer and the seller both state. If I'm just doing this like a paralegal, I'm just using the C.A.R forms, and I'm taking what you're telling me and memorializing it. Instead of working with the watermarked sample, I'm going to be just changing it to a form contract. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my name on it then, if you've hired me. I'm going to send you back the blank. You all can very meticulously make sure that all the terms of the sample you worked on were transferred over. And then and then I'll get it all signatured. Better idea. You're going to say, yes, we're working with you, John. Buyer and seller have agreed. And could you shoot we've agreed the price now and some of the terms. We were working off the sample. Could you send me an agreement with your name on it? And I'll say, I'm happy to do this because the software shoots it out with my name. But you all both have to sign this little thing I'm going to send over for electronic signature saying I'm not representing either side as a buyer or seller. I am, for the limited purposes of providing forms and generic training on the forms that you've received, I'm sending the forms over. But again, I've not inspected the property. I'm not representing anybody either side. I'm not coaching anybody. You guys will sign that, and boom, that's how we're going to take care of it. So you'll have the sample watermarked ones that you don't have any obligation to me to use to work with me. But then if you and the buyer and the seller agree to work with me, and I'll provide a program in different ways, then like, oh, I got it. And I may even say this. If you all both agree to work off this and only change the price, I'll pick, that's what we're going to do. I'll have the sample agreement that I'm willing to work off of. That's just going to be our template. Only thing that's going to change is price. Boom. If you guys need to change something else, I will then shoot that over to you. I'll have you agree that I'm not representing either of you, and that's how we'll take care of it. So this should be an excellent situation for the sellers and the buyers, and that's what I've thought about. Now, I am a little flexible. We can work that out in the future. But the thing is, I don't want to be... The main thing I'm avoiding with this is I don't want you to say you wrote this in and I missed that X. I'm not going to be responsible for your X. Because I'm not... Normally, I'd be picking one side or the other, or I'd be drafting the buyer's contract, sending over to the seller, and even if I was representing both sides, the seller would say, well, what about this, this, and this? I say, well, normally we might counter that term, but that's really between you and the buyer and the seller, and this because I'm not advocating for either one side or the other, and it gets worked out, and boom, it happens that way. This is slightly different because I'm not representing anybody, but we'll work it out. But the point is, I will help you make good decisions in terms of what you're trying to do, and we'll get the forms done for you. Thanks. Talk to you later. This is John McConnin, winnerscheck.org.